So this is going to be my vlog for Wind and Truth. It looks like this book is split into 10 days. I've just finished day 1. I really liked Syl in this section as far as seeing how much she's grown, seeing that she, in what she's able to create with colors and how she can change her form, learning a little bit more about that, seeing her interact more. Really excited to take on the role of scribe for Kaladin. I really enjoyed the conversation in the library. While I really like seeing Syl's growth, the conversation in the library was also, it was like a double-edged sword. Like, I really like seeing Syl grow, but I also, the whole chull head and sometimes I feed it grass thing was dumb and just seemed really uncomfortable and unnecessary. And then also the librarian being so rude, and then Kaladin, his whole dialogue around that about like, you seem like maybe you're projecting a little bit. Like, that whole conversation was a little bit cheesy for me. So I really liked that section with them, but there were parts that I was just like, none of this is really working for me. Some of the dialogue I felt that way about, not the scene as a whole. And really, while we're talking about Kaladin, I'll say a couple of other things, because I feel like here at the beginning in day 1, there's a lot of signposting happening with Kaladin, with Dalinar asking him to take over the throne, with the really long emphasis on Kaladin's goodbyes with Bridge 4, and then with Shallan and Adolin, and, you know, Bridge 4, he's like passing on the mantle and saying, you know, if I don't come back, and there's a lot of internal monologuing about like, I don't know, it seems really final to me. Like, it feels like there's a lot of projection about how final this is, and then Shallan making him promise me you're coming back. I don't want a goodbye. She's essentially saying, I don't want a goodbye. I want a see you later. So between the heavy goodbyes, this might be goodbye forever, hey reader, this super might be goodbye for forever, between that and Syl setting herself up to be his scribe, which is the kind of role typically that someone really important has. And now Kaladin's been given the flute, and he learns the ancient tune the humans followed from Ashen to Roshar. All of this feels like it's signposting that Kaladin is something big is happening with him, which I'm super excited about, because please don't be mad at me, but I felt like Kaladin's character was kind of getting stale in the last book. And so when we started off this book with, you know, more with his conversation with the librarian, I was like, oh man, I don't know about his character anymore. But I feel like we're being signposted that something really big is going to happen with him, something that he is going to come back, but he's going to come back very different. You know, he's already switched from being a Dark Eyes to a Light Eyes. He's already switched from being a slave to now being the heir of the throne. But I think we're elevating a little bit. I could be really off base though. Adolin and Shallan, really love them here at the beginning. They're just very powerful. I feel like they are potentially going to be, they're going to play a really interesting role in this book. Shallan especially is just like really showing off in this section. We also got Wind, capital W, talking to Kaladin and leading him in where he should go. We're getting like the origins of Wind, and that Wind, I guess, predates so many ancient beings, and what it was that made the Wind stop talking because of odium and like things. There's this Wind and Truth narrative being told within the story, and Wind is becoming its own, I don't know, deity. So I thought that was super interesting. I don't know, I'm kind of, at least at this point, I'm kind of digging the 10-day structure. I think that it is a different take that could be really interesting depending on how it's done. And we know that we're leading to something, right? In 10 days, we're getting this challenge. So in 10 days, we know what's coming. So it could add a lot of dread, which might be interesting. Also, odium is not backing down. So I don't know, part 1, it was a lot of setup. It was a lot of reintroduction and, you know, characters, seeing where they're placed and where they're going. So it was light in the sense of nothing really bombastic happened after the prologue, but a lot of little things that make me anticipate something really interesting. I've been reading a lot of books like Malazan and like the City Days of Shattered Faith, other books that are a lot more dense. So switching back into a Sanderson book, I thought this book was going to take me forever, but it's not. It's a really fast read so far. So anyway, on to day 2. Hello. I have finished day 2. I have some highs, I have some lows, so that's what we're gonna go over. Starting with the highs. So we find out that the Stormfather has been lying to Dalinar, and I loved that whole scene, you know, Dalinar going to him, and Stormfather says, no, I don't like your plan, and also, you know, he's been an unreliable resource. So I thought that whole scene was amazing. Odium, too, has been awesome in this section, using the loophole and causing all of this chaos. Dalinar is the strategizer that's been picking up the pieces. I'm really, really excited for Dalinar's plot in this book. I think that Dalinar and Seth are the two that I'm the most looking forward to, because between the role that he's played so far, as well as the hanging threads with his family, the conflicts with Adolin, there's a lot of opportunity for him to find redemption in his family and also, you know, be the hero ultimately of the story. Maybe a sacrificial hero. I could see that happening. I feel like there's some writing on the wall for Dalinar that he's not going to make it through this book. But also I'm just really excited to see ultimately how that all plays out for him. He's a perspective that I'm very, very excited about. Shallan took up a lot of page time in day 2, you know, hunting down the Ghostbloods, showing us how skilled she is with her weaving now, disguising herself, sneaking around, fight scenes. Like there was a lot going on with Shallan, getting information for us. And for whatever reason, even though I can look at the plot points and say, wow, a lot happened, this was a significant thing, I'm just not very engaged with her story so far in this book. But we left off with her in the spiritual realm in this section. Navani's there as well. Gav has been sucked into the perpendicularity, which I'm not excited about. I'm nervous about this plot line because there's a reason this has happened, right? So like it's either in story-wise, he's either about to be killed, and that's going to cause a lot of chaos for a lot of people. I don't know. It'll mess Dalinar up if he's killed. Or some sort of like elevation power up, which that makes me just as nervous, honestly, because he's a child and I don't like plot lines. Well, it's not that I don't like them. It's that I very rarely like plot lines where children are given this huge elevation in power or in like or advancement. And I'm just like, oh, I'm just nervous. I'm just nervous about why we're doing this. What is going to be delivered from it. Okay, Seth is another POV that I'm really, really loving. We're finally getting his POV chapters. I'm enjoying them so much. You know, the guilt that he carries. He's like, I deserve this. You know, all the mass murdering and everything. Like, I deserve to be where I am and to feel the way that I do. And Kaladin's trying to help him through it. Not, you know, he's figuring out how to maybe help him through it. It's not taking right away. Kaladin, okay, so into the negatives. Kaladin is a POV that's just, I'm not loving. Well, I guess we already started with negatives. I talked about Shallan. Kaladin is another POV I'm not loving. He is in this flailing therapist role, and it's very clear on page that he's flailing. It's clear that I am supposed to read him as trying to figure this out, trying to figure out how to help people through their emotional, mental hurdles, and trying to be there for them. And so it's supposed to read as like day 1 on the job, you know, like I haven't really had very much formal training and here's my first client and my second client. I'm gonna do my darndest, right? So I get that, but this scene here at the end of day 2, I hated it. The I want to talk to you about your feelings scene was so corny to me. Like it was supposed to read as flailing therapist, but I didn't like it at all. I think most of Kaladin's dialogue so far in this book has read to me as kind of muted, maybe. Like I used to find in the first 3 books, I found his POV so compelling and so deep and nuanced, and it just isn't feeling that way anymore. And I know people are super defensive over Kaladin's character because a lot of people really relate to him. So this has nothing to do with individual readers or other people's tastes. I don't want to take away anybody's experience with the story, but I'm just not connecting with Kaladin as a character anymore. But here's the other thing is this whole section ended in an explosion. And, you know, we don't know what happened. We don't know what the fallout of that explosion is, but with this explosion, I feel 300 pages into this book, entering into day 3, it feels like the story has only just begun. Like it feels like these have all been setup chapters. And Brandon's always been a slow setup writer, which I have absolutely no problem with. Most of my favorite writers are slow setup writers. But like 300 pages, I object. Anyway, a couple of miscellaneous things. We found out that the Gatespren are corrupted. Their Inkspren. I don't think we've ever seen that before. I didn't reread books 1 through 4 in anticipation for book 5. I know a lot of people did. I didn't, so maybe I'm misremembering, but I don't remember that ever happening before, so that was really interesting. Honor might be able to think for itself. And this whole section ends in an explosion, and then we had our interludes with Lift and El. So Lift was an interlude, right? Yeah, interlude. So like I said, I feel like the story is really only just now kicking off. So I am going to give it one more day because it does seem like it's just kicking off, and because a couple of my friends have told me that days 1 and 2 are the weakest of the days. So I am going to give it a little bit more, but with how much I'm struggling with the book at this point, if it doesn't get significantly better in day 3, I might just DNF it for a while. Come back to it later. I mean, no matter what, in like almost 10 years from now, when the next arc comes out, I'm gonna have to reread all 5 books anyway, so no matter what, it'll get read eventually, if not sooner than later. I do want to know what happens in the end. I want to see how this arc wraps up, and Brandon always has really explosive, amazing endings, but I don't want 1,000 pages to get to a good ending, and I'm struggling with this book more than I have with previous books. So just being transparent with you. That's all I can do. All I can do is tell you how I feel about the book, and that's where I am right now. So fingers crossed, I'm entering day 3, and I will check in with you when that happens. Hello, so I finished day 3 and I liked it so much better. So this was, I wonder if part of my problem with the first 2 days, well, partially it was just a lot of setup and it was boring and there were some cheesy lines, but part of it was also, I think, just like a lot of perspectives, which I'm used to with Sanderson, but not all the time always. So part 3 narrowed down to Kaladin, Adolin, and Szeth, which I've been calling Seth. I'm sorry, it's the SZ combination. I never know which one to prefer because I'm dyslexic. So, anyway, Szeth was, I think, the star of this part. I loved getting into his flashbacks. Terribly tragic. The scene with Molly was horrifying. But also, I really enjoyed seeing how he believes that he is predisposed to always come to the worst conclusions. Like, he can't be trusted. His very personhood, his internal metric of good and evil is wrong. It's off, which is why we've always seen him asking for advice and trying to get other people to tell him what to do, why he so strongly goes by the law and believes the law is the only thing to be trusted and not people. And it was really fun to get the dialogue between him and Cal about, I don't trust people, so I trust the law. The law is good. People are untrustworthy and flawed. And it's like, cool, the law was made by people though. And so, like, there's a disconnect of that rationale. But anyway, I'm still not blown away by the Kaladin stumbling therapist plotline, but Cal also got some really good scenes in this section. Specifically, I loved the conversation between him and Syl when Syl was confronting him about how, we've both kind of set ourselves aside for other people. We've both sacrificed a lot of our own, how did she put it? Hold on, let me look at my notes. Living for other, they've both been living for other people, and Cal acknowledged how he is, and he has been, and then he also said, and you've been living for me, and she confirmed that. And then so Kaladin's conclusion with this conversation was, I need to learn how to live, I have to look at my notes again, how to protect but not live to protect. Now, I think that this is a big old clue for what his fifth ideal is going to be. I don't know if it's going to be exactly this, but it does sound like it's going to be on this track. Like we should hold on to this dialogue right here. Oh, right, we also got Nightblood. We got a good amount of Nightblood in this section, which I loved. A lot of really great action scenes with Szeth as well. I'm really enjoying how these are written. Also, Szeth, the one scene where he was like being buried, and the whole time his shard is passively giving him permission, and the whole time as he's gonna die, he's just like, still wasn't permission, still wasn't permission, still not permission. That whole sequence was amazing as well. But my favorite part of all of the Szeth parts, my favorite part is when all the people, when Szeth was responding to the reaction of the people, and he said, "What do they want from me? Why are they acting like this?" And the response was, "Thankful?" And he said, "I kill, I subtract, I destroy, I'm to be reviled." And the way I imagined him throughout the scene was him kind of like almost collapsing in on himself. Like, I think it was described as he was holding his stomach. Like he was distraught over the idea of anyone being thankful to him for any of his actions, because in his mind, he is to be reviled. Like, he is to be untrusted, and he's to be considered evil. And so this too, I think, was a really significant scene for him, and a really good clue as to what kind of overcoming we're going to watch Szeth experience throughout this book. I hope. A couple of other things. I really enjoyed Adolin's perspective in this book, even though there was, some friction with the Commandant and how that whole thing was handled initially. One line that I really, really liked for him, and again, this was emphasizing the friction he has with Dalinar, was when someone asked him, "You're Blackthorn's son, right?" And Adolin didn't respond. He remained silent because, yes, he is Dalinar's son, but he doesn't know if he's the son of Blackthorn. I thought that was a great line. And then I also really liked the scene when Maya decided that she was going to go try to recruit Honor, try to get Honor on their side. And so she decides to leave, and Adolin lets her go. And I really loved the writing around this scene as well. There's been several scenes in part 3 where I thought the writing was quite strong, which that was like one of my main complaints in part 2, where I feel like I was a little bit irritated, because I was. So, but there's been a few scenes in part 3 that I thought the writing was really strong. And anyway, the description of how empty Adolin felt after Maya left, and it was like this mixture of, it's a good thing that his shard has left and is going to be going on this solo mission now. It's a good thing what she plans on doing. I can't really envision the plan just yet, as far as like how, I don't have any predictions about how this is going to play into the rest of the story, but I'm excited to see it. Let's see a solo mission for Maya. But anyway, it's the, yes, this needs to happen, and him agreeing to make that sacrifice of letting her go, but at the same time, it's this emptiness that he hasn't felt in a long time, almost like this missing of a piece of him with this separation. There was an emphasis, according to my notes that I'm looking at, there was an emphasis on the feeling of absence after she left. So I thought that was really good as well. I have already read the next chapter, the first chapter of day 4, which I won't talk about here, just in case anyone is watching this video sequentially, intentionally. So I won't talk about that in the wrong place, but I will just say that it's a testament to the fact that this has improved so much, or rather that my enjoyment of it has improved so much, because I was considering DNFing in part 2, and then in part 3, I didn't pause to do the vlog clip and instead just went ahead and read the next chapter right away and really enjoyed it, and I'm really excited for part 4. And it looks like, day 4. And day 3 was about 100 pages long. Looks like day 4 is going to be about 100 pages long as well, so it'll be a little bit more snappy, I think, than day 2 was, which I'm crossing my fingers that it continues to be good, because now I feel really hopeful that I'm actually going to really be enjoying this book. Okay, I'll see you on day 5, or after day 5. 4. Hello, so we are doing days 4 and 5 together. Easily the biggest standout character for me still is going to be Szeth. I think we've made a lot of progress. I'm still finding his flashbacks really interesting. Going from monastery to monastery, collecting swords, it's very video game-esque, you know, collect your items, complete your quest kind of feeling, but it's also just, I'm just enjoying it. Like, it's a lot of action. I think there's a lot of downtime happening in other POVs. So every time I have a Szeth POV, I just, even though I guess you could accuse this of being repetitive, because of the type of action we're getting, it's like, oh good, this is gonna be fun, because there are sections of the story that I'm just not really finding very fun. So I'm really loving Szeth because I think we're getting the most emotional depth from him so far, and we're getting a lot of really fun scenes. Oh right, especially because especially between the one with him and the honor blade holders, and he enters the fight with no weapon, and then he pulls out Nightblood, and it's just like, oh, it's so fun. I really love the scene between Szeth and his father when Szeth is about to be taken away, and his father says, well, I'm going with you, we're family, you're not going to be left alone here. And the guy tries to talk him out of it, and he's like, no, I'm going to become one who subtracts. Are you going to change your mind? And he's like, no, we're taking him away. And he's like, great, me either. I'm going to be one who subtracts as well. And then of course, then later on, I think in day 5, his dad continues to try to be loyal to him, and his mom is like, I'm done. Like, I'm not moving again. I'm not uprooting my life again. I haven't subtracted. You haven't subtracted. You can bail too. Like, I'm not doing this, which really broke my heart. It really broke my heart to see that scene play out. His dad, who I love because of his loyalty to his son and trying to do his best by him, and his mom, who's just like, I didn't sign up for this. This isn't the life I want. And she's choosing herself over her family. The scene too, where when he's first brought to the training and all these kids are going feral, and Szeth too wants to do the same. He just wants to attack and completely let loose, and then this voice appears in his head that tells him exactly what to do, exactly what to say in order to distinguish himself from the group. And we're continuing to see Szeth be built up into the person that we have known. You know, we've talked before about how he's always craving someone to tell him what to do, didn't trust himself, and we're really seeing how all of this has been established in him. Like when he challenged, I think it was Zerend, is that how you would say that name? Like that whole conversation where he refuses to take the punishment because he doesn't feel that he's done anything wrong. And Zerend says, well, I said you did, so that's good enough. Take your punishment. And that's like, no, I don't trust a man's word. That's not good enough. Your word of me that I've done something wrong is not enough for me to accept this. And then he ends up attacking the guy. And he's like, okay, now I've done something wrong. I'll go ahead and run the laps. Like, I love that scene. And then that's followed up with him asking the question, like, how do I know what is correct? And the answer he's given is follow the chain of commands, just follow orders. And then he's just sent off to go learn to kill more, which is tragic, which he does. And then he burns the ships too, and then that's too far. And I don't know, as I recount it all, it doesn't, there's a lot of action and a lot of just kind of filling in the gaps of Szeth's past, but it is the best part of the story for me so far. The other character POV that's really that I'm really enjoying is Adolin, and I don't think Adolin is. It's more like a slow build for him. You know, he's fighting the singers. We have good military fantasy. We're learning the Towers game, or watching him play the Towers game. He had that great line about the difference between oaths and promises, expectations versus execution. Adolin's character growth has been very slow, but it's been really satisfying, especially with several of our main characters. It seems like their character arc kind of concluded before we got to book 5. So I think that's probably why I'm latching so much onto Szeth and Adolin, because I feel like I'm getting a lot more depth out of watching them continue to grow than I am in some of my favorites from previous books. Oh, also, Adolin is getting some good action too, like the scene where he breaks through the barricade and kills a dire form and uses its body to like bludgeon people. But I will say Abadai has been just a terribly disappointing antagonist. He just keeps retreating, and I'm just like, I don't feel any sort of threat. I don't feel any sort of bothered. I'm not bothered about him. let's see, Kaladin has made some progress with Szeth. I really liked the conversation they had about fighting the dark thoughts, that sometimes it's like going to battle with them, which I thought was a really good way of relating to Szeth, you know, a warrior, someone who has been in battle throughout his entire life, like treating the battleground of the mind in a way that he could relate to in that way was really good. Sometimes you have to go to war with your mind, which is very true. Even though Cal is still regularly just throwing in a random, how do you feel? Therapy 101, you know, the flailing therapist is Kaladin's MO in this book. Oh, we also got the scene with Kaladin and Syl dancing on the wind. The wind also helps him to play the flute better. It's kind of like a reprieve scene, and I think it's a healing one as well for both Kaladin and for Syl. And then, of course, at the end of day 5, Cal finds Szeth's toy, his comfort thing. And he realizes, I've been trying to relate to Szeth as if he's like me, but he's more like Tien. He was sent to the battlefront way too young, and that's the kind of pain that he is dealing with. So Cal, again, in this new therapist life that he's in, he is trying to relate to Szeth, and then when he realizes, oh, I'm not supposed to relate to you as me, I'm supposed to relate to you as this person, so he's tying everything back to the way that he understands trauma, which is either through his own trauma or through the trauma that someone else that he loves has had. So I'm curious about that. It does seem like he's making progress with Szeth. Like, Szeth has definitely made moves, but then Nale shows up, so I don't know, maybe it's all out the window. Shallan, in her section, she proves to be a very good murderer, as Pattern props her up to be. More leading, more fighting, more discovering new things. She does that, what was it? She realizes that if she allows the Stormlight to heal her while the anti-Stormlight is in her, then it won't kill her. So she's discovering a bunch of stuff, getting a bunch of information. I'm still really not that interested in her perspective. It's just not, I don't know why. It's just, I mean, Shallan's she hasn't been a favorite character of mine since like book 2. But we also have Formless back in the picture, antagonizing her, taunting her, pretty intense stuff. So it makes sense to me that Shallan hasn't just totally resolved, because the Formless resolution was abrupt. So it doesn't surprise me that, like, we're not all healed, like trauma keeps coming back sometimes. So I guess that's what Sanderson is exploring now with Formless coming back, and it's setting Shallan backwards a little bit. Really, with pretty much every character, we're dealing with old traumas. With Szeth, with Adolin, with Shallan, with Rlain, like with several characters, we're looking back at the past and working through, old pain. And with that, I am confused as to why Kaladin isn't talking about the fact that he tried to kill himself like a week ago in story. It's actually something that my friend Grace brought up when we were talking about the book, and I was like, wait, you're right. And I haven't been able to shake that. I'm like, how are we not addressing this? Like, how is Kaladin not also working through that? Because it was so recent. And since everyone is working through their past traumas right now, I just feel like, I mean, obviously Cal, that's been his story, but I just feel like he needs to bring that up and maybe think about that or process it or something. And in a book that is so heavily leaning on characters internally processing everything and just like thinking through and rehashing stuff, it just seems like Cal might mention this at some point. Also, Navani and Dalinar are kind of, I mean, we're learning a lot of stuff, we're learning about odium, about honor, the heralds, going through these scenes of history. At first it was interesting, seeing how they have to like find their anchors and what they're using and how they're navigating. Dalinar's really leaning on Navani a lot, which I really like. He actually at one point, I'm pretty sure, maybe that was me, it might have been me. At one point, Dalinar talks about Navani as like he's reaching out and he grasps a hold of her, and then it's like comfort washes over him. I think this was in day 4. But he's just like, there she is. And that's the emotion that I'm remembering from that scene. I wrote down that she was like his anchor in this moment. You know, it's that internally, relationship-wise, she was the steady thing that like kept him like, I'm okay, it's gonna be fine, as they're navigating all of this. And I really like that dynamic between them, where like they are each other's anchor. And I think that that's a nice piece in the midst of what is important information and interesting information, but also kind of just feels like a big history lore dump. Definitely interesting things happening in these scenes. I don't want to sound too negative. There are interesting things happening in these scenes, but it can be a little bit tedious. Oh, Renarin. Okay, yeah, great scene for Renarin. I really liked, okay, so he used his light weaving to be able to see people's souls and identify people that way. That was really good. And then I really liked the scene where he, for once in his life, feels like he's the one that actually knows what to say. And he reflects back and he's like, wow, this must be how Dalinar feels all the time. Like he always seems to have the words and the strategies. And of course, we're in Dalinar's mind, so we know some of the struggles that he has. But from Renarin's perspective, he's like, man, he always has the words and I never do, but now I'm the one that knows what to say. I thought that was a really great scene, a really good peek into, Renarin's mind and the way he is navigating right now. Oh, right, and Dalinar and Navani found gaps. So I'm super glad that he isn't just like lost until the next arc or something like that. Like I wasn't sure. I figured he'd at least come back at the end of the book, but I'm happy to have him back this early. And they're just protecting him and comforting him, and I really like those scenes. So I'm officially halfway through this book, halfway through the days, and I have significantly less commentary on this half of the book that I have in, especially the first 3 books. You know, I just constantly wanted to dig into these characters' minds and their perspectives and what they're going through and really analyze things. And, you know, there's a ton of lore and world and history and mysteries, and there's a lot happening in this book. But the stuff that I typically latch onto with the Stormlight books, especially for the first 3, I just have so much less to say. I have considered putting it down a couple of times, but I know Sanderson has really good endings to his books, so I reckon we're getting there soon. I imagine it's going to be picking up pretty quickly. I mean, again, a lot is happening, so saying I think it's gonna pick up probably sounds like I mean the pacing is bad, or I don't know, like nothing's happening. That's really, I don't think that. It's just that it seems like a lot is happening, but it's like a lot of things are happening, but not the depth that I've gotten from especially the first 3 books. Maybe I'm being unfair. I don't know. It's just, I'm just not invested in this book like I have been with the others, but it's all interesting, you know? It's all interesting. It's just not, as far as plot and lore, it's really strong. As far as characters, I have a couple characters that I'm really just clinging to. And then there's a lot of others that I'm, I'm chilling with. I don't know. I'll stop rambling. On to day 6. Hello. I think the last time I updated you on Wind and Truth was day 5, and now I'm on day 8, so it's been a minute. Okay, a couple of highlights from day 6. First of all, Szeth. I really like his description of how he views Lightweavers, basically as liars. They turn truth into whatever they wanted it to be, but perhaps reforming truth into what you wanted it to be wasn't the litany of liars, but of all human beings. He said that they made comedy out of reality. And then he was also, Cal and Nale are kind of going back and forth with like some philosophical questions about, you know, when is it okay to break the law, and who's the determiner of morality, and, you know, kind of standard philosophical questions. Cal's not a very good debater, which he admits that a lot of times with debates, the better arguer is the winner, not the one with the better ideas. And he is not the better arguer, so he's not doing so well with this, like, with these conversations. But Szeth then reflects on, okay, are they just trying to win a fight, or do they actually care about me? So he's still working through stuff in this one. I really, really enjoyed the quest, the task, the item retrieval, where he and Syl paired up because they were trying to find the fake Shalash. I don't know how to pronounce half these names. But then when Cal ended up helping and Nale was like, no, you cheated. And Szeth goes, no, I asked for the rules. This wasn't against the rules. And Nale's like, well, I said it's cheating, so you fail. And Szeth actually pushed back. Szeth actually said, oh, I didn't write down what he said. Well, Szeth pushed back. He was like, no, that I don't accept this ruling, which is great. That's good for Szeth. He's learning to ask questions, and he's learning to stand up for himself and not assume that his judgment is always wrong. We also watched his family basically crumble even more than it already had, because his sister is very put off about the way things have gone, and his dad is still standing by Szeth. And he essentially, I mean, it's tough because Elid has already, set herself against their dad. So like her decision has already been made. But at the same time, dad is choosing Szeth instead of, trying to repair things with Elid. Really difficult situation. We're also having some breakthrough with Mishram. I don't know how to pronounce the full name, so I just say Mishram. Yesna confirms that the troops are not actually under attack. So that was just a bunch of wasted resources, wasted time. So that's a big bumski. Oh, and we also got the reveal that the guard that was following Adolin around was actually just that one guard from book 4. No, book 3, who's just super loyal to Adolin because Adolin saved his son's life. I loved that scene. Day 7, we had some awesome scenes with Sigzil. Some of it was off screen, which was pretty disappointing, but still some really great stuff on screen as well. And I think day 8 was where, well, I don't really want to talk about the Sunlit Man in this video. It's been interesting watching Sigzil's story because I'm loving following Sigzil in Bridge 4. I'm loving following that plot line. I think that it's really well written and some awesome things are happening, but also there's certain things. Reading the Sunlit Man does paint the way I view everything, because there's certain things that I already know, and then there's other things that are happening that I'm like, well, how's that gonna work out? Because I know other things. So that's been a pretty interesting experience. I guess I didn't expect Sunlit Man to affect this much of, I mean, I knew that it would affect some of book 5. But I guess I just didn't know what that was gonna look like. Oh, right, okay, day 7, a really important scene, it was just more, it was repeated because we already knew in day 6 that it was false troops. And then in day 7, it's kind of restated, okay, it's false troops. And then in day 8, it's restated as well. But anyway, one thing that I thought was really important that is that Yesna was in a conversation with someone and they started panicking about this misstep and this idea that, oh no, how are we going to pivot from here? How do we know that our next move is going to be correct? This move was wrong. And Yesna calls that a fallacy. The fallacy of believing that you could never know anything because there's always something to learn. And she said if we started to think that our enemy had planned for every possibility, then we'd let our fear of being wrong guide us rather than the facts that we've learned. So that was something that was very notable for her. It seemed like a significant piece of dialogue, so I went ahead and wrote it down. And then I was right because, I think I was right, because in day 8, then when Taravangian appears to Shallan and says, you have one day, like, try to make a counter argument. He says, I hope you don't waste too much time trying to figure out if this is a trick. So I think that that's significant because that's essentially Taravangian building on what Yesna was thinking about with the person that she was talking about yesterday. So that has me thinking that with this challenge that Yesna is about to have, that she's either going to fail or succeed, obviously. I have the feeling that whatever happens, if she fails, it's because she gets in her head. It's because she fails to do the very thing that she herself said was a fallacy. Either she's going to get so in her head and think, Odium is one step ahead of me in every direction. I don't know what I don't know. And so, I can't make the right decision. I can't do anything right. Like, she's going to freeze up. She's going to do the very thing that she said the other person was doing as a fallacy. And it just seemed like she kind of lobbed that up. And then Taravangian was like, okay, here it is. Here's hoping you don't fall into the very same fallacy that you yourself were just pointing out in someone else. So either that's going to be her stumbling block, that she intellectually is wiser than what she's able to be practically, or you know, it's going to be her success, because she starts to spiral and starts to freak out and starts to have this paralysis, and then is able to calm herself, kind of like Navani does in day 8 when she goes through the visions, when she starts reliving her past worst experiences, and she's able to think through it and go, okay, wait. She's able to detect the pattern and realize that she can have some sort of control over this, and she doesn't get overwhelmed and she doesn't get overpowered by the different visions, which I thought also was a great scene. But the fact that Navani succeeds at that makes me think that Yasna will fail at that, just because, you know, that's the way storytelling tends to go. Everybody doesn't succeed. And since Navani succeeded in the very specific thing that I think Yasna is being set up for, it makes me think that Yasna might fail. All right, let's go over Adolin and Renarin's section in day 7, because it was excellent. Adolin's conflict with the Thunderclast and, you know, being overpowered, and it looks like he's gonna fail. He lost his leg. And right before that scene, we get Renarin's reflections on their childhood and how Renarin was always protected by Adolin. He was bullied. He was an outcast. He was never understood by people, and Adolin always was coming in to protect him and to be his defense. And then in this situation, again, Renarin was able to step in and be there for Adolin. He essentially saved Adolin's life. And Adolin, we had some great reflections from Adolin, where he was reflecting on the fact that he's always been Renarin's protector. And what do you do? I mean, that's good. He's glad that Renarin doesn't need him anymore. He's glad that Renarin is growing and can defend himself, can take care of himself. That's a good thing in Adolin's eyes. He's such a good brother. But at the same time, he's thinking, okay, what happens when the thing that you've always been, you're obsolete? You're no longer needed in that role anymore. So now, oh my goodness, 2 in 1, he has these reflections about his brother, and he's just lost his leg. So now he's also not able to be on the battlefront. I mean, as I said, I've already read day 8. So he's essentially knocked out of the fight. Like, they told him, like, you're retired. You're not going to be fighting anymore. And these are 2 major pieces of Adolin's self-identity, like how he views himself. So really, really curious to see where we go with Adolin. We didn't get much check-in with him on day 8 at all. So I'm really curious to see what are we going to do with him from here. I will say I haven't harped on this in a while, but I do keep going back and forth with this book between thinking, oh my goodness, that was a really good line, and then, oh no, that was a really cheesy line. Like, I keep going back and forth with the dialogue on this one. Adolin's internal reflections were really great in that scene, but then the very next scene, we're back with Renarin, and Mishram is shaking the glass and, you know, causing all this ruckus, and it's like this big thing, and then Adolin ends up saying, when I make noise like that, it's because I have so many emotions. I don't know what to do with them. So they burst from me like a storm. And it's just like, it doesn't, some of the dialogue in this book just does not land for me. You know, some of it's just like a little bit much. Renarin and Rlain are starting up their budding relationship as well. Shallan's very excited about it. Oh, and I loved this line after Adolin sees how many people have died and sees like how terrible the cost was of this battle. And he says, they'd paid a terrible price, but they would last another day. Kaladin also gets some internal growth. You know, his main plot point of this book has been to be the help of other people working through their own trauma and mental struggles, as well as accepting that he needs to be able to help people without making that his entire identity and his entire life's purpose. He says, I can't keep strongholds on those I love. I have to live for myself. And this is him saying, like, I'll try to help Szeth, but ultimately it's Szeth's choice what he does from there, which is very true. Oh yeah, and then Nails Highspren hires Cal for therapy advice. He just pops in and sits down and he's like, let me tell you how I feel. So in this section, we also find out that Honor is behind everything and that Stormfather is actually one of the remnants of Honor, and Stormfather doesn't want Dalinar to know his history. He doesn't want Dalinar to know everything that's going to happen. We also find out that the tower is dying because Melishi is maybe how you might say that, is exploring the captive Spren, but I'm waiting for more information on this because I feel like there has to be another shoe that's going to drop, like more information that would explain more reasons why the tower is dying. I don't know, maybe that's just me because like the extreme lore of, you know, of Sanderson fans, like I'm not in that camp of memorizing every little detail, so maybe that's me, but it just doesn't quite seem like enough. But we're clearly going to learn more about Honor's motivations here coming up soon, so I'm really, really excited to get that. But Stormfather is going to hand Dalinar over to Odium. Okay, so day 8, I already mentioned Navani and Dalinar are going through their memories. This is what Odium's putting them through. Odium has every intention of just breaking Dalinar, forcing him to, let's see, he's gonna force him to join him by breaking him down. So this is what we're doing. We're going through the memories. We're going through the worst scenes of their life. Both Dalinar and Navani are experiencing this. I really loved this scene from Gav where he says, will there be peace? Or this is when Dalinar tells Gav, there's going to be peace in the world. I'm going to make this happen. That's what we're fighting for. And Gav says, will there be peace? I don't see it, Grandpa. When I open my eyes, I see us fighting forever and ever and ever. I have to be a soldier. I have to be strong and fight like you. Dalinar is trying to bring peace. That's what he's fighting for. He wants to cut off the source of the problem at its legs. He wants to end the thing that's causing the perpetual wars, Odium. But Gav just doesn't really have that hope that this could ever end. He doesn't see a peaceful ending, which makes me really nervous about what we're going to do with these plot lines. I will say one thing that I really enjoyed about these visions with Dalinar specifically is, or the going back through his life, is there were certain scenes like with Elhokar that we saw again, but they were actually recontextualized. So now we see them from a different, like now our perspective on it has changed, which I just really enjoyed that side of it. And I also just loved seeing Navani conquer her visions, and her scientific, methodical brain was able to catch the patterns and understand, not be overwhelmed by it, which I already said, but I just really liked that. Vinley found Odium's shard pool, which we know is super important from previous books, so that's going to be hugely significant. I've barely even mentioned Vinley, as I've been doing these check-ins, because Vinley, it seems like, has taken up a lot of page time, but not like I've never had anything really to say about Vinley's perspective. And I was actually just reflecting on that yesterday, and I'm like, oh no, I don't think I've mentioned Vinley once in this vlog, but I also don't feel like I have anything to say. But finally, I have something to report on. This is significant. Gav continues to hear voices. Wit retook up the Dawn shard that we thought he had gotten rid of, and now he has 2. Now he like snaps his fingers, and he's like, no, and now he has 2. Kaladin continues to be a therapist. He stops trying to fight Nale, and instead he starts listening. Can you tell me about your problems? Can you tell me about who you used to be? He tries to help him remember who he once was, and Nale takes the bait, shares a little bit, then Cal oversteps, and then Nale kind of snaps out of it. So, but Cal's making a little bit of progress. I'm honest, I'm just not digging Cal's plotline. I like the internal reflections, him trying to get over feeling the need to be everything for everyone, and like that's his whole identity. He wants to continue helping people, but he also needs to take care of himself. Like I like that part of it, but I really don't like the therapy sessions. Like it's not coming off deep at all to me. Like it's just, I don't know. I realize that I just finished day 8 and Cal has been a practicing therapist for 2 seconds, but watching him just ask people over and over again, how do you feel? Or like, can you tell me more about that? I know that is a lot of what therapy is, but at the same time, it feels like the most watered down kind of therapy talk. I don't know. Who am I? I'm certainly not a therapist. Chanarak, is that how you would say that? We got the Chanarak reveal with Shallan, which I think was very obvious. It was very highly signposted, especially in this book with the number of times that we saw the redheaded herald and it was like, hey Shallan, you need to address this, you need to deal with this, and Shallan's like, no I don't need to think about it, no I don't. And it's like, okay, well, I mean, plus, you know, one of Shallan's main physical characteristics is the red hair, and re-dealing with a bunch of trauma in this book, it just seemed Yeah, obvious. But even with that being true, the scenes that we got with Shallan in this section, healing and reliving moments again, this time, especially the scene at the wedding where her mom was in the back and she actually got to deal with it, and her altars were talking about, you know, we were trying to protect you, and they kind of like went through this healing process together. And Shallan, even at one point, she was like, you deal with this, you talk to my mom. And it was like, no, you have to be the one to do it this time. It's time for you to be the one. I can't shield you anymore. So I thought that scene was really good. So Szeth has been primed to be the next herald. Like, that's what they've been prepping Szeth for. It turns out that Elid was the honor Nimi that he was facing off against when he decided, I'm done fighting, I'm done doing this, and he quits, and Nimi can't, and Elid also can't fight him. So they get to have a really good conversation, but it also turns out that both his dad and his sister are dead, and so he's been fighting these, like, in these in-between state memories. I'm also pretty convinced that the voice, even though Szeth is convinced that the voice is an unmade, I'm pretty convinced that it's not, because the voice appeared to Szeth long before the heralds splintered or broke, long before the heralds broke. So I feel like it has to be something else. I don't think that that's what it is. But again, I'm not the lore person. I mean, obviously I'm interested in the lore, but you know, like, a lot of Sanderson fans are like really intense on lore and memorize it like nobody's business. That's not me. I'm along for the ride with a lot of these types of reveals. I'm just like, I just don't think it's the unmade. I could prove myself. I mean, that could be dumb of me. So Szeth is considering this herald thing, and he's like, I don't want this burden. I want to die. I don't want to be made a herald. But then he's like, well, but maybe I deserve this. Maybe having to live with this forever is an apt punishment for me. Anyway, there have been a lot of really excellent scenes, but there's also a lot of repeated things. I think because we're in this 10-day period and we keep checking in, there's certain characters that we check in with every day, even if like nothing has really happened so much that day. And so, for instance, Yesna is a great example of that. Day 6, 7, and 8, I feel like we got the same information over and over again. Now, granted, on day 8, we actually had some progress because Taravangian visited her, but this is happening with Vinley, this has happened with Adolin, this is happening with a lot of these characters where it seems like we keep checking in with them, but I think I said in a previous vlog clip, a lot of it feels like baby steps. Like, they're not really making big progress from day to day, which is fine, except that we're checking in with them so often, and we're checking in with so many people so often, that I don't feel like very many characters are actually making strides, which is how it would feel if we spent a significant amount of time with a character. Now, I'm also reflecting on the fact that a lot of the characters are going through really similar things. Like, pretty much near every character in this story, in this book, in book 5, is reflecting on their past and figuring out how to deal with that past and how to move forward. But just the same, several characters are the misfits, the outcasts, the ones that have never really felt like they fit in with anyone. And now their personal arc is them figuring out how to be true to themselves and how to move forward in a way that is right for them. That's been a big bonding point for Renarin and Rlain, but several other characters are going through that similar arc too. It's like, it's different. We're viewing it, we're tackling these issues in different scenarios with different characters and their different ways that looks like, but they're all kind of dealing, not all, but most of them are kind of dealing with very similar internal reflections and ways that they're moving forward, which, because it's so similar across so many characters, it's still their own flavor of it, but still, like, similar. The same basic idea, just played out in its own way across so many characters. It makes it feel a little bit shallow. Maybe shallow is not the right word. It makes it feel a little bit like not as deep, because we're doing the same thing in so many places, just the same. We're collecting knowledge, we're collecting items, we're having an abundance of flashbacks, be it through Szeth or through Shallan or through walking through the memories of history. It just, so much of this book is set in the past that I'm not explaining this well. It just seems like not only is there a lot of repeated information because we're checking in on characters so frequently, even though their storylines aren't moving very much. So we're checking in on them and kind of we're in the same spot again, and then we pop back away after a scene or two. So not only is there a lot of repeated information, but there's also repeated character beats between the characters. Like, they're going through such similar things that the whole story feels a little bit stale, despite the fact that this entire book is doing something different from what the other books were doing, but it's doing the same thing in several places. I don't know if I'm explaining that well. I am finding myself at times loving what's happening and super into it, and at other times I'm fatigued. I'm tired of it. Anyway, I woke up this morning thinking, I'm going to finish this book today. I only have 3 days left to read, in story, 3 days left to read. So I'll finish it today, but I keep forgetting how long this book is. So now that I finished day 8, I'm like, oh, I'm definitely not going to read 2 more days tonight, but I'll probably finish day 9 tonight, and then I'll do day 10 tomorrow and check in with you one last time, finish up the vlog, which does mean that I will have this video will go out a day late, but no one's ever bothered me about it. Nobody's ever cared that I post a video a day late, and I don't want to rush the end. I want to enjoy it because I do think that this ending could be really, really great. Like, there's certain things that have been set up that I think are going to be great. I'm really curious what's going to happen with Jasnah, even though we are doing, something similar with Odium, where Dalinar is essentially playing the role of Cal and being like, how does that make you feel? Tell me your story, like he did with the Herald, with Nail. Tell me your story, explain it. I can't take your pain. I can't carry this for you, but I'll help you carry it, right? So, like, he's kind of filling the role of Cal for Stormfather, but we're about to get Stormfather's story. And yes, it's another flashback. Yes, it's more of like telling of history, but I don't know. That's what this book is. And I'm interested in this. So I'm interested in that. I'm interested in Jasnah's thing. I'm interested to see where Dalinar's story goes. Is Szeth actually going to become a herald? What's going to happen with Adolin? So there's a lot of questions that I'm excited to get answers for. So even though I have been pretty up and down with this book, I'm excited about the ending. So I will check in with you tomorrow. Hello. I'm going to see if I can talk to you about days 9 and 10 before I lose the last of my sunlight. I don't know. I think I didn't realize how much I had hanging on the end of this book. A lot happened here at the end, and I will go over some of the plot points that went on. Some of them I really liked, some of them I really didn't. But I think I didn't realize how much I've been just kind of plodding through. Generally fine with, what's going on. Like, it's felt like a 3-star book this whole time. Things I like, things I don't like, generally having a perfectly fine time reading it. But I've just, in my mind, been saying, like, yeah, but the ending is it's gonna like bring it over the edge. It's gonna make it great, and I'm gonna love it, and I'm gonna be happy, I'm gonna be satisfied in the end. I knew that the end of this book was going to be setting up, the second arc. I knew that there was gonna be a lot of setup, there would be open threads, but I thought that there would also be an ending to this, and I don't feel like there was enough of that. It was pretty much all open threads, with like a little bit of conclusion, but almost no falling action. Let's go through plot points. Let's address some of the happenings. I don't remember. I assumed Jasnah very well may lose her debate. Navani was able to not get overwhelmed by what was happening around her. She was able to think through the information that she had, ground herself, and get through it, and not become paralyzed by the overwhelming situation that she was in, which is exactly what Jasnah had addressed as the fallacy a few days ago. And so now she's in this situation with this debate, and I'm thinking, okay, we watched Navani succeed at this, so now we're going to watch Jasnah fail. And I was wrong. I mean, there was some element of it because she did stay up all night trying to study up on different political issues so that she could win the debate, and then Taravangian ended up debating her personally, like your ideals. He made it a lot more personal, and she wasn't prepared for that. So there was some amount of that, but not really. Really what it ended up tying back into was what Kaladin did, which I should have known. It was that I should have known. It was what Kaladin said when he was debating Nail, and he said that oftentimes in a debate, the person with the better ideals isn't necessarily the winner, but rather it's the person that's the better debater. And in this situation, Navani, no, her name is Jasnah, wasn't prepared for Taravangian to turn the debate in this way, and she ended up getting cornered because of that. And it's not that Taravangian is right, because he certainly isn't. And I'm a little bit mad at Jasnah for being duped this way, for being cornered in this way, because it really just didn't feel good enough for her. You know, like, Jasnah is one of my favorite characters, and I just kind of think that she is smarter than how she was depicted in this scene. But she was very tired. She did stay up all night. She had exhaustion spren flying around her head, and, you know, she was thinking too rationally and not really relating enough with, oh shucks, I've forgotten her name again. I always forget her name. The other queen that was sitting there with her, that was shocked at Jasnah when she said, yes, I was considering assassinating you when I was, like, you know, trying to figure out if you were good or not. And yes, I am willing to kill someone that I think is going to hinder the greater good. And, you know, she's, like, very logical, very methodical, very, like, information, which I appreciate, but it wasn't so good for her friend, who's like, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't kill you, even if I thought you were bad. So she lost her faith in Jasnah, and because of that, she sided with Odium, who she knows who Odium is. She knows that he is just, like, so much more evil. And I get that you're disappointed in your friend and you're let down and you feel like, I've lost faith in this person, so let me side with evil incarnate. Like, I don't know. I didn't like this scene because I think Jasnah's smarter than this. Like, this is very baseline philosophy stuff. And, like, I failed to believe that Jasnah has never considered some of the things that Odium brought up. And then on top of that, I failed to believe that What's-Her-Face would side with Odium. Like, why? Why would you do that? I don't care how disappointed in your friend you are. So that was annoying. There was some good stuff with Szeth. Let me say something nice. Oh, okay. So Nail is trying to force Szeth to become a herald, and it's not looking good for him. And when the spear is thrown and it intercepts their fight, and Kaladin steps forward and he's like, do you need my help? And Szeth says, yes, I choose Kaladin as my champion. Oh, it was so good. And then Kaladin starts fighting and it's not going so well. And then he chooses to be the herald for Szeth. Like, it was very satisfying. And then he pulled out his flute. And I do feel frustrated at how quickly day 1 on the job Kaladin, I mean, it's like day 8 on the job, Kaladin, like, he's not been a therapist for very long and he's not done a great job at it. And I do feel frustrated at how quickly he's gotten breakthroughs with Nail and Szeth. Like, I don't think that their mental health is cured, but I also feel like, it seems like a lot in a very short span of time. So, like, I'm happy to see Kaladin finally in action and acting like himself a little bit, but at the same time, I'm also frustrated. I don't like the way his arc went this book. And now he's the therapist for the Heralds. You know, he's going to fill the 10th spot in the Oath Pact. And I feel like even just, like, knowing the words for his 10th ideal, I will protect myself so I can protect others, which, admittedly, I guessed in the beginning that it was going to be along that route, but it just seems like he struggled so much for his other ideals. And this one it just seemed to come so easily. He's being successful in this new therapist role so easily. I don't know. Back to the positives. Szeth's conclusion was satisfying. I do like that he was able to, he made that breakthrough. He was able to start making decisions for himself, know what was right, trust himself. He dismissed his spren, we're not a good match, you're not the one for me, which was good for him. He picked up Nightblood, which I thought was really satisfying. He abandoned his oaths immediately after swearing after the 5th ideal. And it just seems like he is on track to be at peace. He put his dad and his sister at peace, and now he is on track to be at peace as well. And I do think that that's satisfying. Adolin, I thought too, had a satisfying arc throughout this entire book. I think that he was definitely one of the star players of this book overall. He had some amazing action sequences. He did end up figuring out how to continue fighting and continue being amazing, even after losing his leg, even fighting with a candelabra at one point. And he gets his shard blade back. There were some things that I didn't love about his conclusion either. Like Maya had this whole conversation with him about, you know, you devote your life to being everything for everyone else, and you really need to learn to live for yourself. And I'm just like, okay, well, that's the same thing that Cal's Spren taught him. So once again, we're just recycling the same lessons and the same like growth points between characters. Like literally, that's the same thing that Syl confronted Cal about at the beginning of this book, that he needs to learn how to defend others without making it his whole identity, and he needs to live for himself, figure out what he needs for his life. And then here Maya is telling Adolin the same thing. And two, also, I really thought that we were going to get something out of these really, really angsty feelings he had about his dad. Like, it seemed like that was really building to something, and he kind of just sorted it out in his head, which again is a display of kind of a wider problem that I have with this book, which is that so many characters are going through really heavy stuff, but they just kind of like internalize everything. Like they work it through in their head to the point that there's not as much outward friction as there could be, because they're just like sorting it out with these internal monologues. And that's essentially what happened to Adolin. Like, he just worked it out on his own and didn't really get the big conflict with his dad that I thought might come. And even, we'll talk about Dalinar now. I really enjoyed Dalinar's big sacrifice, his decision in the end. You know, Gav ended up being Odium's champion, and then Dalinar is faced with this terrible decision. You do this or you do this, and he's like, well, I'm gonna choose, you know, option C. And it was a gamble, but Wit at the end was like, it was a good gamble. Like, he made the right choice, and it was this bittersweet conclusion. He was able to send out good vibes, good feelings to everyone that he loved. But I was really, really happy, especially with the way Taravangian, you know, it turned more into a philosophical fight between Taravangian and Dalinar. And I really, really loved the discussion when Dalinar was like, I'm not going to fight my grandson. Like, I'm not going to fight Gav. I'm not going to do it. And Gav was like, I will, you know, like he has been sitting here for a long time. He has been seeing all these horrible scenes. He's been manipulated by Odium, and he's like, I hate you. I don't trust you. I don't want you. I challenge you, right? Like, so Gav is all in on this. And Dalinar's like, this can't be your champion. You can't do this. You've cornered me. And I loved Odium's response when he was like, would you prefer I give you a different innocent that you wouldn't feel guilty killing? So I love that question of, really? Should I just give you some other kid? How about some other person who didn't do anything wrong that you don't mind? That's a faceless, nameless person. That's not someone you have a personal relationship with. So kill them. But you won't kill someone you care about for the greater good. Interesting. I thought that was a really good conflict. It was a good move on Odium's part. And I do think that it was bittersweet and satisfying at the end. But I also think that this was a good opportunity for Adolin to be forced to wrestle more with his dad. He had all these difficult feelings. He had all this friction, all this frustration, and it wasn't resolved. He didn't get to talk it out with his dad. He didn't get to hash it out. He didn't get to address it fully. And then his dad dies, supposedly. So like, he could be grieving and mourning, but also angry and also not have any closure. And like, that could be what we have to carry on into the next arc for Adolin, is him just like still having to work through all this grit, because you don't always resolve everything before someone dies. And for Adolin, he had so much, and instead of just like working it out on his own, he could have been left with that burden. But to also Navani, and I just feel like there wasn't falling action in this book. And for a book this big, one would think that there might be some, or at least more than what little there was. Shallan, I do think that the Ghostblood plot ended up being pretty unsatisfying at the end. And now she's trapped in Shadesmar. She does have a way of contacting Adolin, but she's trapped there. She's pregnant. So, you know, I guess she's going to have to get out of there in the next book or books, you know, whenever that time comes. But I just thought the Ghostblood plot would be more epic. Like, it took up plenty of page time, but I don't find it satisfying. Oh, Wit has Sigzil take the Dawn Shard. That was crazy. Navani goes into this stasis with Sibling, this dome of light around Urithiru that is permanent, like it's not going anywhere. And now the radiant abilities, they're active here but nowhere else. And there's like no undoing this until I guess Yesna is gonna figure something out maybe. But like they're stuck. It's stuck. So that's really interesting. And again, Falling Action, I would love to explore that more because I feel like this is a really big sacrifice on Navani's part, and it just kind of like it just felt glossed over. And I feel like we could maybe dwell on this a little bit more and explore that a little bit more, or at least like have some in a book that is so full of reflection, we could reflect on that a little bit more. Now we have Retribution. After Dalinar is killed, the evil Blackthorn has been created. So it's kind of like, Dalinar was killed, but like, was he totally, or he was killed, but like now we have this evil version of him. I don't know how that's all gonna play out, but it also feels like, I don't know, we'll just have to see how that goes. I'm not sure how I feel about it at this point. I did just finish reading this section, so obviously probably you can tell that my thoughts aren't fully together. I'm just kind of giving you my reactions. But anyway, Honor and Odium combine to be Retribution, so that's going to carry over into the next arc. I do think that the Spren are gonna, the Shards are going to eventually figure out how to have more willpower, more personal agency. Obviously, we got a ton of history as well in this section. Tanavas arriving on Roshar with cultivation, struggling with the power, creating the Spren together, Ashen getting destroyed, the non-aggression treaty, the creation of the Fused, the Heralds. You read the book, you know all the lore things and all the history stuff that we got as well. So tons of information happened, as well as several of the characters, like, personal conclusions of their arcs. Renarin is an ambassador of the Singers and is going to find out what really happened with Dalinar. So obviously there's more that we're going to get from Dalinar's perspective and from how people are going to be processing Dalinar from here forward in the future books, whenever those do come. I do also think that Mishram, Abadai, Mraize, a lot of the villains in this book just weren't very impressive. It does feel like there's more open threads than there are, and that's fine. I'm fine with more open threads than closed ones at the end, but it seems like there's almost all open threads. And maybe that's uncharitable of me, having just finished the book. It's really frustrating because this whole time I'm reading the book thinking, yeah, this is not one of the stronger Stormlight books. I didn't think book 4 was one of the stronger Stormlight books either. So, okay, that's what we're doing. No worries. I'll be satisfied at the end. And I do have more disappointments than I do positives at the end of this. And I'm really sad about that. I do think that there were a lot of really great moments in this book, but there were also a lot of not so great moments. Like, even it seemed like in the previous books, there were really, really impactful moments. And it seemed like this book was going for a lot of impact, but a lot of times it just didn't work out. Like Dalinar declaring, I understand you, which I just feel like there could have been a better line than that. And that came right on the heels of Kaladin, are you his god? And Kaladin's like, I'm his therapist, which I don't even care that the word therapy is used in this book because Wit is the one that introduced it. But I do care that Kaladin made it his mantra to the point that he's like, this is a word that doesn't exist in this world. Wit gave it to me, but now I'm just going to use it as if everybody knows it. Like, you're using it as if this is normal language. And I don't know, I do feel like there was a lot of that in this book where there was a line of, I can't stay here for too long because that wouldn't be good for my mental health, which is a very modern phrase, a very modern way of stating that. The word fatalism was used multiple times. The word chauvinistic was used. Words, it seems like there are concepts that are used or a fallacy. There were many times when we're talking about mental health stuff, there were words that were used as shorthand instead of just explaining the concept, instead of just using the concept, you know, in world in a way that would feel more organic for what level of knowledge these characters have of these concepts. But they were just shorthanded, and since it was so heavy in the personal mental health exploration throughout this entire book, that it felt way more obvious in this book than it has in previous books. I sound so negative at the end of this review, and I just didn't think that the video would end this way. I think books 1, 2, and 3 are extraordinary books. Like, I adore the beginning of this series. Book 4 was a step down for me, and then book 5 is another step down. And that's really disappointing because Stormlight has been in my favorite series list for years. Ever since I read book 2, I think I've had Stormlight in my favorite series lineup, and then book 3 confirmed it. Like, this is it. Stormlight is one of the best series I've ever read. And then book 4, it stayed in my favorite series list, but it got knocked down a couple of notches. And then when I made my favorite series updated list this month, Stormlight wasn't in it anymore. And that hurt. But I do feel like the series has changed a lot. Like, these deep, deep personal character arcs seem like they all kind of have melded into each other. Like, they have different details, but they're doing the same thing, and they're not exploring them with the depth that they once did. And there was a lot of really big lore stuff going on. Certainly some big plot movements happened in this story, but I am first and foremost in love with these characters. And it seems like for several of them, their arcs were already done by the time we got into this book, and what we got from them in this book wasn't as meaningful as I would have hoped that it would have. I'll get my thoughts together a little bit better when I talk about it in the wrap-up, spoiler-free, but these are my off-the-cuff, I just finished the book. I called Jimmy right away and I was like, I don't know how I feel about this. What do I do? Processed it a little bit with him, and now I'm processing it with you, and that's basically it. So this is very just like I'm figuring this out as I'm talking, but I am disappointed in the end. And I'm disappointed that I'm disappointed. I think this book was meant to be, or I thought it was going to be, yes, the beginning of the next arc, the introduction of it, a lot of buildup, a lot of like setting things into place, but also a conclusion. And I think we didn't have near enough of the conclusion side of it, and a lot of cheese. Overall, the first 3 books in the series are still absolutely extraordinary, brilliant books. But if I ever reread the series, I'll probably just reread the first 3. Maybe read a summary for the next 2 in anticipation for the second arc. Maybe I'll feel differently in 8 years when the second arc begins. But those are my initial final thoughts on the book. And I'm sorry if they bum you out. Thank you for watching this video, and I'm also sorry it was so long. Bye.